She wore his name like a crown, dined under chandeliers, kissed by camera flashes, draped in diamonds the world swore she earned. But behind a hidden safe, buried in a penthouse wall, was a name the media forgot. A woman they never showed. A legacy she never surrendered. Because while the new girlfriend posed like royalty, the real queen, she was quietly reclaiming her throne, with legal proof, a sealed will, and a daughter no money could silence. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments, and if you believe in stories where the erased come back stronger, hit that subscribe button right now. This isn't just betrayal, it's beauty, power, and poetic revenge unfolding line by line. And by the end, you'll know exactly why the woman they tried to replace was never replaceable. They called her the new queen, but no one asked what happened to the first. The room shimmered with champagne and crystal chandeliers, but beneath the opulence, secrets simmered like a ticking bomb. Avery Cole stood beside billionaire Jordan Hayes, her hand laced through his, her diamond bracelet catching every camera flash. To the public, she was the chosen one. The glamorous girlfriend of a tech mogul worth billions, the woman who turned his once-shattered heart into a symbol of second chances. But only a few knew the truth. His heart had never been hers to begin with. Just 3 years ago, before the yacht parties and red carpets, Jordan Hayes had been a different man, not less rich, but less reckless. Behind closed doors, he'd built his empire with a woman whose name had been wiped clean from the narrative. Serena Bennett, his wife of 10 years, the woman who stood by him when the world still saw him as a scrappy underdog. A woman who bore his daughter and sacrificed her career, her body, and her peace, only to be erased like a footnote. Now she watched from across the city, alone in a 2-bedroom walk-up in Harlem, as Avery soaked in the spotlight that once belonged to her. She didn't cry anymore. Not for the betrayal. Not for the abandonment. Not even for the injustice. What burned in her now was purpose. Avery thought she had the full story, that Jordan's divorce was clean, the past buried, the future hers. She moved through his penthouse like it was already hers. She hosted brunches on marble counters, wore silk robes embroidered with his initials, and called herself Mrs. Hayes when no one was listening. But the real Mrs. Hayes had never left. Because what Jordan never told Avery, what he never told anyone, was that the divorce wasn't as final as the headlines claimed. There was an unfiled codicil. A quiet clause buried in legal paperwork. And a promise, whispered into Serena's ear long ago. No matter what happens, our daughter will never be left with nothing. That promise was legally binding. And Serena had been patient. Not out of weakness, but out of strategy. She let the world forget her. She let Jordan rewrite the story. She let Avery pose in her old seat. Because Serena understood something Avery didn't. Revenge isn't loud. It waits. It studies. It prepares. Then it returns with the full weight of the truth, signed, sealed, and unbreakable. Across town, Jordan stared at a locked safe tucked behind a false wall in his private office, its contents unchanged for years. Legal deeds. Trust accounts. A final will. And one name written in ink too permanent to erase. Serena Bennett. This wasn't just about inheritance. It was about erasure. And for Serena, reclaiming her name wasn't about the money, it was about making history remember who really built the empire. But Avery didn't know any of this, not yet. She was still smiling for the cameras, still believing she'd won. She didn't know she was just a chapter in someone else's unfinished story. And when the truth came crashing down, it wouldn't be a scandal. It would be a reckoning. Avery Cole knew how to play her part, the poised, adoring girlfriend who asked the right questions and smiled at the right moments. Her world was gold-leafed, filled with tailored gowns, curated brunches, and the intoxicating scent of legacy. And Jordan Hayes? He was everything she thought she'd been waiting for, successful, powerful, and just emotionally scarred enough to make her feel like she had healed him. But healing was never part of the deal. Replacement was. From the outside, they were the perfect couple. Avery had begun helping Jordan launch the Hayes Foundation, a charitable venture designed to polish his public image. She sat in on meetings, reviewed gala guest lists, and drafted speeches that sounded altruistic but remained safe. Yet every step deeper into his world made her feel like she was chasing shadows. Decisions were already made before she arrived. Names she didn't recognize came up again and again. One name more than others, Serena. At first, it appeared in the smallest places. A copy of a draft grant proposal titled The Bennett Initiative. A photo in an old box, A young Serena standing beside Jordan in front of a nondescript office, both smiling, sleeves rolled up. Avery told herself it didn't matter. The past was the past. She was the present, and the future. But the illusion began to crack the day she overheard Jordan on the phone. He was in his private study, door slightly ajar, his voice low, but tense. "We agreed this would stay buried, Serena. You promised." The name hit Avery like a slap. She waited until the conversation ended, walked into the room like nothing had happened, and asked, "Everything okay?" Jordan smiled, tight-lipped, evasive. "Just old business." Avery didn't push. But inside, doubt had already begun to bloom. That night, while Jordan slept, she wandered back into the study. Her eyes landed on the antique bookshelf, oddly shallow in one corner. She pressed her palm against the back, and heard a soft click. A hidden compartment. Locked. But it was there. From that moment, Avery's obsession wasn't Jordan's love, it was the truth he was hiding. Meanwhile, Serena Bennett wasn't hiding anything anymore. Quietly, methodically, she was collecting her proof. The clause Jordan tried to downplay during their divorce, the one that guaranteed her access to his legacy for the sake of their daughter, Lila, hadn't expired. In fact, it had only grown stronger with time. And now, with Jordan's assets tied to public foundations, she had legal angles to press. She wasn't after his money. She was after her name, and her daughter's right to be seen, not as a forgotten offspring of a billionaire's past, but as the rightful heir to everything Jordan built. Across the city, two women, one living in illusion, one rising from erasure, were heading toward the same truth. And Jordan? He was too busy managing his image to notice that his foundation was built on fault lines. For days, Avery couldn't stop staring at that locked compartment. She tried everything, searching Jordan's drawers, watching his movements, even slipping his keyring off the marble counter while he was in the shower. Nothing fit. Nothing opened it. And with every failed attempt, her anxiety twisted deeper into obsession. What was he hiding? Her answer came one Friday evening, when Jordan received an urgent call and left the penthouse in a rush. He forgot his briefcase. But more importantly, he forgot his watch. The vintage watch he never took off. The one Avery had once teased him about. "You still win this like it's 1995. What she didn't know then was that this watch was custom, and inside the crown, it held a micro key. And it fit the lock. Her hands shook as the compartment clicked open. Inside, one slim, black folder, marked only with his initials and a red tab. Last will and testament, final codicil. Avery sat on the floor, cross-legged, breath shallow. What she read shattered everything. Serena Bennett wasn't just Jordan's ex-wife. She wasn't a faded part of his past. She was, by his own written hand, the primary heir to nearly 70% of his estate. Not Avery. Not any future spouse. Not even his board. Serena. The codicil, dated just 1 year after their divorce, stated clearly, all assets, trusts, and intellectual properties are to pass to Serena Bennett, in her role as mother to my daughter, Lila, and an acknowledgement of her foundational role in the formation of my business and personal legacy. There was more. A clause that said, should I become incapacitated, scandalized, or otherwise unable to manage my public image, Serena is to act as co-executor of the Hayes Foundation and its subsidiaries. It wasn't just inheritance. It was control. It was power. And it was already signed, notarized, and legally binding. Avery read the document 3 times, her heartbeat loud in her ears. The blood drained from her face. She wasn't building a future, she was squatting in someone else's past. The penthouse wasn't hers. The foundation wasn't hers. He wasn't hers. When Jordan returned, Avery was waiting. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply held the folder in her lap, open. Jordan froze. You lied, she said, her voice hollow. I didn't lie, he replied quietly. I just didn't tell you everything. Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. You paraded me around. Made me feel like I meant something. When all along, you knew? Serena had the throne. Jordan sat down across from her, hands clasped, defeated. Serena earned everything. I gave you comfort. But with her, I built an empire. She just never asked for the spotlight. Avery laughed, sharp, bitter. She didn't have to. You gave it to her in writing. And just like that, the roles reversed. Serena, who'd been painted as forgotten, had been holding the final card all along. And Avery, once the apparent victor, realized she'd only been borrowing what never belonged to her. Across town, Marcus, Serena's legal advisor, clicked send on an email. Attached was the same codicil, now filed with the court. Serena had waited long enough. It was time to reclaim not just her name, but the empire that had always been hers. The silence between Jordan and Avery stretched for days. He moved through their penthouse like a ghost, answering only when spoken to, eyes glued to his phone, speaking in whispers when legal counsel called. Avery, once the radiant centerpiece of his public image, had become an unwanted echo of a chapter he could no longer control.
She didn't scream. She didn't pack her bags. She stayed.
Because if Serena had played the long game and won, Avery would learn to play it longer. And dirtier. She reached out to Evelyn Shaw, a ruthless, high-powered attorney who specialized in image protection and contested wills. Together, they combed through Jordan's business records, public filings, and foundation deeds. Avery wasn't trying to reverse the will, she wasn't naive. But she was determined to walk away with a piece big enough to still matter. If she thinks she can erase me overnight, Avery said through clenched teeth, she's about to learn I don't disappear quietly. Meanwhile, in a quieter part of the city, Serena sat across from Marcus at a weathered law office desk, her fingers wrapped tightly around a porcelain teacup.
She wasn't gloating.
Her eyes were tired, her body tense. Because even a win, especially one this big, comes with a weight.
I didn't want it like this, she whispered.
I wanted dignity.
Privacy.
But he gave that up the moment he flaunted her around like I never existed.
Marcus leaned forward.
Then take back what's yours. Not just for you, for Lila.
Serena nodded. And that's when the filing went public.
Headlines screamed, Billionaire's ex-wife reclaims control over empire. Hayes Foundation executorship transferred to former spouse. New girlfriend in legal tug-of-war with ex-wife. Within hours, Jordan's board demanded a meeting. The foundation's image, once pristine, was now in jeopardy. Investors whispered about scandal. Donors paused their checks. Jordan stood in that boardroom like a man split in half trying to protect his legacy, half too ashamed to fight the woman who helped him build it. When asked why he kept Serena's name on the codicil, he looked down and answered honestly. Because she earned it. Every sleepless night, every unpaid hour, every piece of her I took without giving back. She earned it. I just didn't have the courage to admit it publicly, until now.
The room fell quiet. And then came Avery's counterattack.
A press release, slick, rehearsed, and cut like a knife. I was misled. I was promised a future built on trust. I was used as a replacement for a legacy someone else wasn't man enough to protect. I won't be silenced. The court of public opinion split like glass. Some sympathized with her heartbreak. Others called it performative bitterness.
But Serena? She didn't respond publicly at all.
Instead, she walked into the foundation's offices, now legally hers to manage, wearing a simple navy suit and carrying a framed photo of Lila, placing it on the desk where Jordan's nameplate once Saturday.
Not to gloat,
but to remind the world, this was never about vanity, it was about visibility. Still, Avery wasn't done. She requested a private mediation, a final sit-down between all three of them. Not for love. Not even for money.
But for clarity. Serena agreed. Jordan hesitated. But the stage was set.
Because in this war of silence and spotlight, only one truth remained. There can't be peace until all the ghosts in the room speak their names out loud. The conference room was nothing like a courtroom, but it felt like one. Glass walls, cold steel chairs, the hum of an air conditioner that couldn't cut the tension between the three people seated inside.
No cameras. No reporters.
Just lawyers, a mediator, and the wreckage of everything left unsaid. Jordan sat at the head of the table, flanked by his legal advisor, his face drawn and pale. To his left, Serena Bennett, composed, deliberate, her dark eyes fixed on the table, not out of weakness, but discipline. And opposite her sat Avery Cole, elegant, controlled, but vibrating with restrained fury.
No one spoke for a long time. Then, the mediator leaned forward.
We're not here to relitigate. We're here to reconcile what remains.
Financially. Legally.
Emotionally, if possible. Avery broke the silence. I want the truth. Not the legal version, the human version.
Jordan looked at her.
You want the truth.
He exhaled.
The truth is,
I loved Serena first. Before the world knew me. Before the money. Before any of this mattered. She knew the man who failed. Not the man you saw on magazine covers.
That's why I could never let her name go, even when I let her go.
Avery's jaw tightened. Then why keep me around? Why lie? I didn't lie, he said quietly. I believed I could start over. I believed that burying the past meant I could rewrite my future. But all I did was hide from what I owed.
He turned to Serena. I'm sorry.
Serena didn't blink.
Do you even know what you're apologizing for?
Jordan hesitated. For leaving you. For not fighting for you publicly.
For letting the world think you didn't matter.
A silence followed. Thick. Heavy.
Then Serena spoke, not to Jordan, but to Avery.
I'm not your enemy, she said.
I never was. You were told a half story, handed a polished illusion.
I know what that feels like.
I lived it, in reverse. Avery looked at her, eyes glossy. Then why not come forward sooner?
Because dignity isn't loud, Serena said. It waits. It survives.
And when the time is right, it speaks. There was a pause, and then something unexpected happened.
The door opened.
Lila, Serena and Jordan's teenage daughter, stepped inside, flanked by Marcus. Her presence stunned the room. She walked past her father, past the tension, and stood beside her mother, clutching her hand. Everyone talks about the will, Lila said softly. But I'm not here for money. I'm here because I watched my mom disappear from photos, from websites, from mentions.
Like she never existed. She didn't ask for revenge. She asked for respect.
And that's what I want too, for her.
For me. The silence that followed was louder than shouting. Avery's lip trembled. Her voice cracked.
I didn't know. Serena stood, walked slowly over to Avery, and held out her hand. You are used to.
But now, we both know the truth.
So we decide, do we keep fighting, or do we start healing? Avery looked at her, eyes brimming with tears. Slowly, she reached out, and shook Serena's hand. Jordan watched, silent. The architect of the pain now powerless to undo it.
But Serena? She wasn't waiting for him anymore. She had her name back. She had her daughter. And now, she had the room.
6 months later, the story that once gripped headlines had faded from the public eye. But for those who lived it, nothing would ever be the same. The Hayes Foundation's lobby looked different now. The marble plaque that once bore only Jordan Hayes' name had been replaced. It now read, The Hayes Bennett Legacy Center, founded in vision, reclaimed in truth. Serena walked through those doors every morning, not in defiance, but in quiet authority. She wasn't interested in revenge headlines or vindication applause. She'd come to do the work, not just for herself, but for every woman who had been overlooked, erased, or replaced without a second thought. She expanded the foundation's reach, building scholarship programs for young Black girls in tech, funding trauma recovery programs for women navigating high-conflict divorces, and creating safe spaces for single mothers with big dreams and little help. She didn't need Jordan's shadow anymore. She had stepped into her own light. In her office, a single framed photo sat on her desk, Serena, Lila, and Jordan, from years ago. Not as a memory of pain, but as a reminder of everything she survived and built beyond it. Jordan, true to his word, stepped back from executive roles. He quietly supported Serena's leadership, issued public statements acknowledging his past failures, and retreated from the spotlight. He wasn't a hero in this ending, but he was finally honest. And sometimes, that was enough. He and Lila were rebuilding their bond, slowly. He no longer bought her silence with gifts. He earned her presence with time. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And Avery? She left the penthouse 2 weeks after that final meeting. No press release. No dramatic exit. She returned to London, where she enrolled in a course in non-profit governance and later launched a boutique advisory firm for women navigating post-breakup legal battles. She never called herself a victim again. Instead, she said something else, in a quiet interview years later. Sometimes you don't lose. You're just redirected back to yourself. One afternoon, Serena received a package at the foundation. No note. Just a photo frame, the same one from Jordan's safe. Inside it, a picture of Serena and Jordan, in the early days. It wasn't bitterness. It was closure. Serena placed it on a shelf beside a new one. Her and Lila, cutting the ribbon to a youth tech center bearing their last name. Not Hayes.
Bennett.
Because that name, the one they tried to bury, was now printed on walls, whispered in boardrooms, and carried by a young girl walking proudly in her mother's footsteps.
The story didn't end with the will. It ended with a woman choosing herself.
Comment below, who are you rooting for? And why? Share this story if you believe justice isn't always loud, but it always finds its voice. Subscribe for more true feeling stories where the overlooked rise and the underestimated reclaim everything.